With Brock Purdy at the helm for the San Francisco 49ers, how does it affect everybody else in San Francisco? We're looking at Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, potentially George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk. There are so many big names in San Francisco. And how is Brock Purdy going to impact them? We're going to talk about that and so much more on tonight's episode of the Football Guys Mailbag Show. But Vic, start us off here. We already lost Trey Lance. Now we lost Jimmy Garoppolo. Now here we are with Mr. Irrelevant starting for a team that's an NFC favorite. It's kind of unbelievable. But what does Brock Purdy do to this team?
Oh, well, let's start with the fact that the Niners came into week 13 at plus 650 to win the Super Bowl, plus 260 to win the NFC at least. And they went to plus 111, plus 1100 to win the Super Bowl. So from 650 to 1100. I mean, without Jimmy G, honestly, Dave, that surprised me a little bit. I expected, obviously a little bit of a swing there, but is Jimmy G is he that big of a piece to that cohesive unit? I mean, they're loaded in general. I think he can get it done. Now, as far as the pieces around him, right? He went for 210 yards and 2 touchdowns in relief of Jimmy G last week. Pretty good. CMC, to me, I am excited for him. He's the biggest beneficiary in my eyes. He's going to benefit from those checkdowns. 10 targets last week, 9 or 10, I believe. He went 8 for 80 yards and love that receiving touchdown. And obviously, still going to be those rushing opportunities there because, this is like you said, Mr. Irrelevant. They might want to get that ground game going. So, yeah, I think we might have to knock these pass catchers down slightly for the rest of the year. Dave, I know last week we kind of talked about Deebo Samuel. We already kind of knocked Deebo Samuel down a bit. Last week, he hasn't been looking like himself. We know he's dealing with that injury, coming in and out of the lineup, coming off the field, loosening up. So we kind of knocked him down a little bit last week. I think Ayuk might be the one that suffers the most. We know he's getting open downfield, and I'm not sure that Brock can get him the ball. They might just keep this offense easy with the checkdowns and kind of Deebo, Kittle. Those guys are going to benefit more than Ayuk there. But I'm not knocking them down too much. I'm excited to see what they can do this week, and their upcoming matchups aren't too bad. I mean, the Bucks, the Seahawks, Commanders, Raiders, Cardinals, nothing too scary on there. The only thing here, too, outside of that, Dave, one more thing, is that the Niners defense is coming back into their own. I mean, they were never bad at any point this season, but they're just crushing it now again. So I don't know if Brock's going to have to throw too much either. So again, that's another reason where we might want to knock these pass catchers down a little bit. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think all of the running backs see a boost. I mean, whether it's Christian McCaffrey, if Elijah Mitchell gets back into the lineup, Jordan Mason, Tyrion Davis-Price, whoever is taking snaps out of the backfield is going to see a boost here because they're going to want to lean on that a little bit. But I think you kind of hit it. I mean, and the question here from DFS Danny Yu said death for Ayuk might be a little melodramatic. I mean, Brandon Ayuk is still alive and he is still going to have some plays here and there. But I mean, we were talking last week about him potentially being like a back end wide receiver 1, kind of at that wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 bubble. And I don't know if Brock Purdy is going to be able to support that whatsoever. I mean, last week, he still saw 9 targets, which you got to get excited about. 9 targets, anytime a wide receiver is pulling that's not something to scoff at. But he did see his lowest yard per reception of the season. So I think it's just going to be a very different type of usage for Brandon Ayuk. I mean, we saw him, like you said, getting open deep downfield. And it seemed like Jimmy G might not have the biggest arm, but he always put that ball right where it needed to be for Brandon Ayuk to catch the ball and rip off yards after the catch. And now it might be a little bit different. But we did see Brock Purdy. I don't know if you saw the little sound clip that came out after the game where he apologized to Brandon Ayuk and he said, I missed you multiple times in this game and I am going to feed you going forward. So you got to like that. I mean, it's not every single day that we see somebody come in and take an accountability in game 1, and Brock Purdy didn't look terrible. So for him to call out his his faults and the mistakes that he made, I think speaks a lot to his character. A lot of guys in Brock Purdy's situation would be beating their chest and saying, "I told you so." Every single team, passed on me in the draft, but Brock Purdy didn't do that. He talked about his mistakes, and I think that's a really, really good sign. I guess we have to mention it, and I feel crazy even bringing this up, but I mean, is Brock Purdy going to be the guy, or do we see Baker Mayfield? Yeah, I mean, obviously not. Baker Mayfield was traded, but they called up Josh Johnson, and I'm sorry, Baker Mayfield wasn't traded; he was signed by the Rams. But do we see Josh Johnson maybe step in here, because he does fit in with that more mobile quarterback, like they wanted to kind of build the offense with Trey Lance, or do you think it is Brock Purdy's job?
That's such a good question. I'm honestly not sure, because Josh Johnson is he's no Mr. Irrelevant. I think he has just as much power there to get that job done in that offense too. That's a great question. I don't think we can hit the nail in the coffin here and say Brock Purdy's 100% the starter the rest of the season, especially because, again, we already hit on this. Jimmy G got the job done for them. He's not the most talented player on their offense, so they've shown they can go very, very far and win tough games. And Jimmy G is just kind of an average quarterback. So if Josh Johnson does kind of come to it in practice and kind of starts to outplay him, I mean, I don't see a reason why they couldn't have a changing of the guard there. But I just I'm hoping one of them can get the job done, because it's just too much fun to watch these skill players every single week.
And I just had a moment where I just really aged myself here, because I'm talking about Josh Johnson being a mobile quarterback. I mean, I remember him trucking through people in Tampa Bay and running a lot, but I just looked it up and he is 36 years old. So probably doesn't have that mobility anymore. It'll be interesting to see what this team does, but I think this is, just to answer the question, we already talked about it. It's a boost for everybody in the backfield, specifically Christian McCaffrey. But I think that Debo now, passes Brandon Ayuk up in rankings once again. We were talking about how Brandon Ayuk could kind of surpass Debo, but now I think he's going to get more touches out of the backfield, more bubble screens, kind of do what he does best and get him those manufactured touches. And then the last guy, we've talked about everybody here a little bit, but does this have any impact on George Kittle? I mean, it seems like the biggest impact on George Kittle is whether Kyle Shanahan decides that he wants to feature him or not. Some games he's a tackle, and some days he looks like, Travis Kelce reincarnate. We never really know what George Kittle we're going to get.
I agree. I don't think it's the quarterback that's changing anything with Kittle here. And you would expect kind of any guy that's newer to any kind of system is using usually their tight end, especially a tight end as talented as George Kittle, using them as a safety blanket. So it's yet to be seen. Obviously, it was a small sample size last week. I'm sure they'll get him more involved, especially if they're not, like we already said, kind of shooting the ball downfield to Ayuk.
And this could end up being one of those really weird, sneaky situations where in two quarterback and super flex leagues, Purdy might actually be a guy that you're plugging into your lineups. I mean, it's not something that I'm not saying go out and, plug him in over your quarterback right now in a single quarterback league. But, we see it with Jared Goff. We saw it with Jimmy Garoppolo. We're seeing it right now with Mike White. You don't have to be the best quarterback in the world when you're surrounded by elite playmakers, and Brock Purdy is in a better situation than just about any quarterback could hope to be in. So if he's available for whatever reason in a super flex or 2 QB league, pick him up and see what happens, because we got a few weeks left and he could end up putting up some decent points there. But want to thank everybody for tuning in to another episode of the Footballguys Mailbag Show. We don't have Troy here today. Victoria, I think he's at a hot dog eating contest. I think I saw that's what Troy's up to, but hopefully he'll be back next week. But just want to remind everybody that if you have not already, be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/footballguys. So you can check out all of the content that we are pumping out here. Just starting to dip our toes into the YouTube shorts. So check some of those out as well if you are interested. But Victoria, let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, you can find me at FFB_Victoria on Twitter and Instagram. I'm starting to get into my DMs for start sits, and you can always at me on Twitter for your start sit questions, of course.
And I'm Dave Kluge. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge, but most importantly, be sure to follow Footballguys on Twitter at Footballguys. We make it really easy for you. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and everywhere else that you want to find us. But let's go ahead and dive into the show. For anyone that hasn't watched before, we start off with our pre-submitted questions that we get through Twitter and email and Discord, and then we will go into the chat. So start dropping those questions now in the chat, and we will get to them after these next few questions. This next one, Victoria, I think we could talk about this one for a little while. We got All City Sal from Twitter asking us, are you worried about Justin Fields versus the Eagles in week 15? What do you think, Vic?
Oh, I can't wait to hear you go off on this question. I did look up, because this is pre-submitted, I looked up his points. I already knew my answer. I'll just be very clear. Absolutely not. This was, if you have him, you're playing him, and that was true weeks ago, probably for the last month at a minimum, right? Justin Fields hasn't had under 19 fantasy points since week 5. He also had 25 points against New England. He had 24-ish against Dallas. These are two very good defenses versus quarterbacks. He's already proven he has a fine floor with his rushing abilities, and he's going to make it through against a tough defense. You absolutely cannot worry about Fields anymore. And he came back from that injury last week and still pulled off a pretty incredible fantasy week. So, yes, keep him in your starting lineups.
Yeah, I saw he is actually on pace, and obviously on pace for such a obscure metric is kind of tough, but he has 3 touchdown rushes of more than 50 yards, and the record right now is 5. And that was Chris Johnson set that record. Justin Fields might surpass Chris Johnson's record for 50-yard touchdowns in a season.
Whew.
And like you talked about, and that's exactly what I was going to say, New England and Dallas. That was, Justin Fields started to heat up a little bit, and that's when some people were kind of paying attention and they said, "Hey, this Bears offense seems like it's gelling a little bit. Why don't you pick him up and bench him against New England and Dallas, and then you can start when his schedule softens up a little bit." And he crushed in both of those games. So no, I don't think that you can bench him. The one other thing I'll say, and you talked about the 19 points per game, he hasn't finished worse than QB8 since week 6. He's given us at least a top 8 performance every single week since week 6. So no, I don't think you can bench him at all. We've got another tough matchup too, where he's going to be playing against the Buffalo Bills in the fantasy playoffs. Don't bench him there either. As we've seen, this Bears defense is terrible, and their offense runs through Justin Fields. So I expect them to lose huge to both the Eagles and the Bills. But when they're down, that's when Justin Fields gets his points running all over the field. Like, his hair is on fire. So no. Do not bench Justin Fields at all through your fantasy playoffs. Next question comes in from Not Your Own Facts on Twitter, and he is asking, PPR pick 1, Gabe Davis, Latavius Murray, or Deonta Foreman. So we're talking full PPR here, where Deonta Foreman has little to no pass catching upside. Gabe Davis has been as boom or bust as possible. Latavius Murray, I mean, it seems like he's the guy in Denver, but how valuable is that? Who are you taking here, Victoria?
I love how you framed the end of that. How valuable is being the guy in Denver? It's so true, though. It's a great way to put it. I think I gotta go Foreman here. I know it's PPR, but first off, keep an eye on Foreman this week. He did not practice today. Coach was saying he's not sure if Foreman's going to practice tomorrow. Now, I don't know if that's going to keep him out of the game, but they're playing Seattle. Come on now. They're allowing the second most points to running backs right now, over 100 rushing yards per game. We've already seen Deonta Foreman put up multiple 100-plus yard games this season. And I think he'd be a top 20 play this week if he's healthy and he's going. So he's a great play when Carolina can stay in the game. When they're trailing, he really becomes just not part of their game plan. And I think that's the key. I think the Seattle rushing defense isn't good enough to halt him very much, and he could have a great week. I think Carolina could stay hand in hand with Seattle. If he's out for some reason, I think I'd have to go Murray here. I know you said it's kind of ugly, but I know I just Gabe Davis I want to say too, Gabe Davis, the ups and downs were bound to happen, right? Boom bust receiver. We knew that going into the season, going into drafting him for our teams. But he's also been dealing with an injury for the last couple of weeks, and you can tell that's hindered him a little bit. He might actually come out of that this week a little bit healthier. That's why I'm kind of it's a tough decision between Murray and Gabe, because he's got these 10 days to get much healthier after this little mini bye the Bills have right now. But Murray's got guaranteed work. He had over 65% of snaps last week. That was with Mike Boone, the backup running back in Denver, back and healthy. And he's getting a couple targets per game. He had 4 targets last week. I mean, it's not all terrible. He's got a decent flex floor for you. Would you pick Gabe out of? I don't know if you're even going to pick Foreman for this question, but
I am going with Gabe, and it's a tough one. But I mean, you go back, you got to go all the way back to week 3 to find a game where Gabe Davis hasn't seen at least 5 targets. And the way those targets come, they are as valuable as they can be, because they're coming either 70 yards downfield or in the end zone. It feels like that's the only time Gabe Davis ever gets targeted. So I realize the floor with Gabe Davis is non-existent. You can get a one catch for 15 yards sort of game, and you might have to live with that in your lineup. But this is when, you really need to pull out these wins. So I feel like here's when you kind of chase upside. How terrible would you feel starting, Deonta Foreman or Latavius Murray and getting your 8 to 12 points? Well, Gabe Davis goes off for 115, 2 touchdowns on your bench. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that is always within his range of outcomes. And then looking at the matchup against the Jets, that Sauce is going to be shadowing Stephon Diggs to some extent. I mean, Stephon Diggs is going to be the primary focus of the defense. So this seems like one of those defenses where he might be able to beat him deep, and Gabe Davis might be able to rip off a big play here. So just on the pure upside of Gabe Davis, I think I'm starting him here. But this question is more about, I'd say, risk management than anything else, because you've got Latavius Murray and Deonta Foreman, who are about as safe and low ceiling as you can get. And then you got Gabe Davis, who is as risky as he can get, but can give you a 35-point fantasy week.
I love that we gave a little bit of an answer for each person there. So not your own facts. Hopefully you can take that and make your decision.
Right. And I'm assuming this is a flex spot. So you've got to assume, looking at wide receivers and tight ends here, or wide receivers and running backs. So hopefully they've got solid running backs, and hopefully they've got solid wide receivers. It's not like you're hoping for, this isn't like your RB1 spot where you need guaranteed points. I feel like if you're going to take a risk, the flex spot is where you do that. And Gabe Davis, I mean, it's been rough, frankly. I mean, he hasn't done it since when was that last boom game he had? That was week 5 against Pittsburgh. And he's had, a little touchdown here or there, 93 yards and a touchdown against Minnesota, but we haven't seen that like huge boom week since week 5.
Yeah, but the next best game was week 10 against Minnesota. He had 21 PPR. He had 10 targets in that game for 93 yards and a touchdown. So since then, though, nothing above 11 points, 11 PPR points.
Yeah. And then same thing with Deonta Foreman. I mean, he had that one huge game where he went, 130 yards and 3 scores or something like that. And that was his first game without Chuba Hubbard or Christian McCaffrey. But he hasn't done anything close to that since. And that he's getting guaranteed volume. But for me, I think we've discussed this one enough. It really depends on what you're looking for. Latavius Murray, it's kind of tough for me to put him ahead of Deonta Foreman, so he's kind of the odd man out. But for me, it's Gabe Davis or Deonta Foreman based on whether you are looking for a floor or a ceiling. Let's move on to this next question, and this one comes from Z Robert, and he says, who is the ultimate Hail Mary play this week in my major underdog matchup in PPR? So obviously either a deep league or eyeing some people on waivers here, but we got Elijah Moore, Travis Homer, Jordan Mason, Robert Woods, or Devontae Parker.
Wow.
I mean, none of these are great options, but hey, he was honest with us, looking for that Hail Mary play. Who do you think it is, Vic?
This is really tough. Obviously, the Seattle backfield fiasco, we have to keep an eye on this week, right? It seems like every one of their running backs, their top 3 running backs are all hurt. You got Kenneth Walker, you got to pay attention to that. You got DJ Dallas, who's also hurt, and I think Homer himself was hurt. I think he practiced today, and the other 2 sat out, if I recall correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got that. That's the guy that's got your best floor there, obviously. Jordan Mason, we spoke last week about that backfield, right, Dave? We really want to stay away from the guessing game that is that backfield. So I gotta do a little X there.
It does seem like Jordan Mason took on the Elijah Mitchell role technically, but he saw like 5 or 6 carries. Like, yeah, that's not anything. Yeah,
it's not enough, and it's just to spell CMC. And Robert Woods, my goodness, this guy has been very disappointing this season for fantasy in general. I couldn't imagine slotting him in my lineup. Devontae Parker, I mean, I think he had 4 targets last week. He's just, you're either going to get him the Mac Jones from the Vikings game, or you're going to get the Mac Jones from last week against Buffalo, where they have his number and they know the formula to beat Mac Jones. So it's just so hard because one week that you're going to have Nelson Aguilar get in the end zone for a touchdown, and 1 week you're going to have a long Devontae Parker catch. And Elijah Moore, I just want to cover all my bases here because these are tough. Elijah Moore, even, the hype came back. Zach Wilson's out. Let's prop up every single Jets skill player. And Mike White has done that. He's propped basically everybody up except Elijah Moore. We're still not seeing him get that fantasy production that so many of us, excuse me included, wanted to see this season, which is so disappointing. But this is tough. I think I would have to keep an eye on the Seattle backfield here and just kind of take Homer here for at least some kind of floor, because these other, we just talked ceiling and floor, Dave. I don't think these other guys really give you a ceiling at all either. So I think I gotta go Homer here.
Yeah. And that's exactly where I'm at, assuming these are all waiver wire pickups. I think the move right now is to pick up Travis Homer immediately. Like you said, with DJ Dallas and Kenneth Walker both expected to miss, that could be a pretty good spot for Travis Homer. Like, we know he's got really, really good pass catching upside. He's a great route runner and he can get the ball out of the backfield, running some wheel routes here and there. So he does possess a little bit of upside there. And really, it's just kind of a who else is going to carry the ball. Like, they have to give it to somebody, and Travis Homer might be like the last guy standing. So I think the move right now, if you're picking these guys up, is to pick up Travis Homer, just because if DJ Dallas and Kenneth Walker he is definitely the guy. And I'm with you. Elijah Moore, I mean, we saw that big touchdown in Mike White's first game and everybody got really excited about it. But did you see what he followed it up with last week? 2 catches for 7 yards. I mean, it just hasn't really been there. But in a game where they are going to be playing against the Bills, it could get out of hand quickly. And, we saw how many pass attempts did Mike White throw last week? 57 or something like that. I mean, it was absurd how much he had to throw, and he might be in a position like that again. So Elijah Moore didn't do much last week, but he did draw 6 targets. So if this is going to be another situation where the Jets are going to be forced to throw the ball a lot, they clearly have faith in Robert Saleh to let Mike White clearly has the faith of Robert Saleh to throw the ball. So yeah, I think for me, it comes down to Travis Homer and Elijah Mitchell, and just, shakes out. For me, it comes down to the health of DJ Dallas and Kenneth Walker. Now, we only got one more question, and then after this question, we are going to go to the chat and start answering those. So we see these questions coming in, and we will get to them in just a few minutes. This last question comes in from Twitter as well. Start Jamaal Williams, James Cook, or Rachaad White?
This is... I have a similar question for myself in one of my leagues this week, and I'll be honest with you. I kind of opened it and I said, I'm going to give it a few days, right? Because I hate to say this. We keep saying, keep an eye on this and that, but this is the time of the season where injuries are just piling up and guys are just dealing with tons of ailments, and you just got to keep an eye on these practice reports. When I say that, I'm talking about DeAndre Swift, right? We saw DeAndre Swift have a fantastic week last week.
Again.
Yes, right?
Sprained ankle popped up on the injury report today. You got to be kidding me.
Exactly. You're like, it looks like he came out squeaky clean. Everything's good. He's going to be coming back into his zone. He's going to win me my league. And now his ankle.
What is in the water in Detroit? Because we've seen this now with Javid Best, Kerryon Johnson, Kevin White. I mean, you name any running back, Kevin James, I'm sorry, any running back drafted by Detroit in the first 2 rounds just hasn't been able to stay healthy through my entire life. Like, I just don't get it.
It's awful. It's awful. Now, it doesn't mean these other guys, James Cook or Rachaad White, they also have some upside this week too, right? We saw the James Cook breakout game last week, which I, as the resident Buffalo Bills fan here, love to see it, right? Against New England too, even. 14 attempts, he had just over 60 yards there. He had 6 receptions for 41 yards. That's what I love to see. Josh Allen.
Add it up. First 100-yard scrimmage game, 105.
Ooh.
Love to see it.
Yes, it was very, very, love it, love it, love it. Josh Allen's taking what the defense is giving him. He's targeting Cook in the middle of the field. It brings an element to the offense that's kind of been missing. And it was great to see it happen against New England. He had an almost identical snap count to Singletary last week. Singletary got the touchdown. He's the bigger back, so I get it. But he's getting those high-value PPR targets. Now, this person that asked the question didn't say if it was PPR. So that's, James Cook, Rachaad White, they get an obvious bump in PPR leagues. Jamaal's not getting any of that passing down work, especially now with Swift. He'll probably still be back, maybe if not in a limited capacity this week. Rachaad White, though, hasn't had less than 10 fantasy points in the last 3 weeks. He said 10, 20, and 17 full PPR fantasy points over the last 3. This guy's a great RB2 with upside and full PPR. Sure, he gets San Fran this week, I believe. It's a tough D, but the Saints are a tough rushing defense as well. And they utilized him a lot last week. I know it was the last minute touchdown
He
that
really
added.
salvaged his outing in that last 30
Exactly.
seconds.
But they're still using it. I mean, Fournette was on the field. I get it was the split. I don't know if you looked up that split, Dave. I don't have that on me. But it seemed
Fournette
pretty.
did outsnap him ever so slightly,
Oh,
outsnapped and out-touched, but Rachaad White got more targets and more goal line work. So the high-value touches are going Rachaad White's way. The overall touches are going Fournette's.
okay. That's what I figured. It seemed very 50-50 as we were watching that.
But one thing I'll point out, though, and I don't know if you saw this clip just started circulating today. It was after that final play. They were lined up with 3 seconds left, I think they had 5 or 6 seconds left. They scored with 3, but they called a timeout. Tom Brady went to the sideline. Leonard Fournette was in the huddle, and Tom Brady started yelling at Leftwich, and he said, "We need Rachaad out here. Put Lenny on the bench." So Tom Brady was the one that made the
Ooh,
call, subbed out Leonard Fournette for Rachaad White on that final play of the game. So that's definitely something to
okay.
take notice of. You don't want to get too deep into narratives, but if Tom Brady's calling for Rachaad White in the final play of the game, that probably means something.
Absolutely. And even if we didn't have that, that's awesome context. Even if we didn't have it, we know he trusted him with those last few seconds of the game to get into the end zone. This is off topic, but did you see the post game interview when the interviewer asked Rachaad White, "How you feeling when you drive home tonight? What are you gonna be thinking about?" And he said, "Honestly, just food. I'm pretty hungry." I love that.
I always love when people get their first primetime interview because like a guy like Tom Brady, you interview him after the game and it's breathing for him. He's done
Yeah.
it a million times, but you could tell Rachaad White was so nervous and I'm hungry. All I can think about is food.
That was hysterical. I love that so much. Now I got way off base and off topic for the question, but honestly, I like Rachaad White here. I am. Here's the thing with Cook: you're hoping that he continues getting that usage, right? The split between Singletary was 50-50, but he was again a similar situation to Rachaad White. He's getting those targets that Singletary is not getting. White is getting the targets Fournette is not getting. Now, Jamaal is getting into the end zone every single week. The man has, between each week, he's either got more or the same amount of touchdowns as the entire Denver Broncos offense, right? I love to hear it. So you've got a floor. You start Jamaal, you got to expect a touchdown, but he's not getting the high value touches here. So this is tough. I might go White here. It's very close between White and Jamaal for me, though.
And we haven't talked about the Jets much, but I think the Jets are probably one of the most headache-inducing backfields this week, trying to figure out what they're going to look like with Michael Carter back in the mix. But these three, Detroit, Buffalo, and Tampa Bay, I think these are 2, 3, and 4 for headache-inducing backfields because we have trends going in complete opposite directions. Like, had you asked us this a week ago, I think we all would have been saying Jamaal Williams, no
Easy.
questions asked whatsoever. He's getting all the touches. He's going to score a touchdown or 2 every single week. But now it looks like DeAndre Swift is taking over, but DeAndre Swift is injured. And now we've got signs that James Cook is taking over in Buffalo, but can we trust it or was it a fluke? And then Rachaad White, he's not getting all the touches, but he's getting the high value touches. This is a really, really, really tough question. And I do not envy the person who is asking this because I really don't have a strong take either way. I think what it comes down for me is just looking at the matchups here. And that matchup against Minnesota in a dome is going to be a shootout. And Vegas thinks so too. They got a 53.5 over under on this game. I mean, the implied total for this game is through the roof. So if Vegas is predicting that this game is going to score somewhere in the 50s, I think you could probably bet on Jamaal keeping that touchdown streak up. I mean, if they're going to be scoring 3, 4 touchdowns each team, Jamaal Williams probably finds pay dirt at least once. So I'm going to go with Jamaal Williams here, but you can make such a strong argument for any of these 3 guys to be the start. Sorry, wish I had a better answer for you, but that's all I got. Go with Jamaal Williams and hope for the best, but not a good spot to be in. Now let's go ahead and go to the chat, and we have a ton of questions in here, so we'll try to get through these before we wrap up here in the next half hour. And this first question comes in from Andre saying, can you rank these wide receivers for Week 14 in full PPR? Gabe Davis, Elijah Moore, Traylon Burks, Rondale Moore, and Mike Williams. I need to start 2. So we got a lot of Burks and Mike Williams, huge question marks right now over their health. I'm just going to throw Burks out of the equation because that was a brutal concussion. I think we all saw that one, and his likelihood of playing this week looks pretty slim. Mike Williams returned to practice, but I don't know what to expect from him funny enough, somebody dropped Mike Williams in a very high stakes and competitive league I was in last week. Luckily, I had
Excuse me,
96 fab dollars
what?
left. I dropped it all $96. So I got Mike Williams on my team now. But those bye weeks, man, they get tricky. But I don't know if Mike Williams is going to play this week. I would bet not. Aggravating a high ankle sprain just over a week ago, I think he's got a pretty uphill battle to play this week. So really, I think we're kind of between Gabe Davis, Elijah Moore, and Rondale Moore here because I don't know if Burks and Williams are going to play.
Yeah, which is Rhonda is also, I think I was about to look it up. Did he stay out of practice today as well? I know he's dealing with something.
I think you're right, actually.
I'm gonna.
You can talk. I'll look it up real quickly.
Okay, awesome. So I think Gabe Davis. If you Andres, if you didn't hear us talk about Gabe Davis a few minutes ago, just rewind on the YouTube video, and we talked a bit at length about Gabe. So I think you got to start Gabe here. We did just discuss Elijah Moore. Again, I don't know how long you've been rocking with us tonight. Elijah Moore's just not, he had 6 targets last week, but we're not seeing the production he got in the end zone the week before. So potentially there. But if Mike Williams does play, let's say, you're putting him in,
he's
right?
the clear-cut guy ahead of everybody here.
Exactly. But if Williams is out, I would have to play Rondale. I just had to pay attention to the practice reports because I don't know.
But even that's tough because we've yet to really see what Rondale can do with a healthy Hollywood and DeAndre Hopkins on the field.
That's what's scary. And that's why I think that if he is dealing with any ailment, they're not, they're not worried about it at this point because they have Hopkins and Brown back.
And I looked it up. Yeah, he missed today's practice with a groin injury.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Well,
Greg Dortch returned too, making it even more crowded.
Yeah, Greg. I love his story this season. What a guy. So it's Williams and Gabe. That's the answer if Williams is playing, but if not, do you gotta slot Elijah Moore in there? I hate that, but
yeah, for me it's Mike Williams and Treylon Burks if they play, but I don't expect either of them to play.
Right.
So yeah, it's Gabe Davis, and then after that, Elijah Moore, Rondale at the end. But yeah, let's hope. It's still Wednesday, so we still got a few days left here. But let's hope because I'm going to be watching Mike Williams closely to see if he's able to suit up this week. But yeah, he's one of those where his big playability, I think, makes him a must start. Even if they come out and they say, hey, Mike Williams is going to be limited, you still have to play him because his chance of ripping a 50-yard touchdown every single week, very similar to Gabe Davis, kind of the West Coast Gabe Davis here. You just got to plug him into your lineup and, live with the variance week to week. So, yeah, that's a tough one, but keep a close eye on practice reports and hopefully you'll have a clearer picture before Sunday morning. The next question comes in from Stephen Carter. With Kenneth Walker injured and having a tough schedule for the rest of the season, is Ezekiel Elliott the better play in coming weeks?
This is an interesting question, and now we see
keeps eating.
Zeke is churning. He's getting into the end zone. Like, what else could you want for somebody that you drafted to be an RB2? He was going that late. I can't imagine this is anybody's RB1. Apologies if he was. But yeah, they're churning. Yes, he's got to be a start in your lineups now, unless you've got, a stacked roster. He's in your flex. And Walker, here's the thing with Walker and the Seahawks and Pete Carroll. You cannot trust that man with any injury news ever whatsoever. Whatever he says this week, you just have to wait till the inactives come out.
I don't mean to cut you off, but Pete Carroll genuinely this offseason said that Chris Carson was progressing well and expected back soon, like 3 days before he announced his retirement.
Unbelievable. Exactly. So you got to wait till the inactives, honest to goodness, to wait on Walker, see how he's progressing. But absolutely. I mean, we talked about Zeke so much in the offseason on the show that he's just getting it done every single season, no matter how, how you say a win is a win is a win. This guy gets in the end zone. It's ugly. It's whatnot, but he's getting the points still. And that offense is churning. So yeah, he's a start for sure.
And getting involved in the pass game too. I mean, it's weird. You watch this game and you watch a Cowboys game and you're like, my gosh, Tony Pollard just pops off the screen. And then you check the box score and it's like, wait, how did Zeke end up with 17 fantasy points? Like it just happens every single week because, he catches a handful of catches or a handful of passes, rips off a chunk play here or there, and just seems to stumble into the end zone every single week. So, yeah, Kenneth Walker banged up right now with an ankle injury, right? I believe that's what he's dealing with. So no
Mm.
guarantee that he even returns to form 100%. So yeah, right now I don't think there's any qualms about playing Ezekiel Elliott ahead of Kenneth Walker. Next question comes here from Bennett Collette saying, could Kamara be a league winner?
Bennett, I don't know if you've been watching the last couple of weeks and that's not meant as an insult, Bennett. I saw a tweet. Forgive me, I don't remember who it was that tweeted it out, but it was something like Kamara had, was it week 5 when he had that blow up game, 40 something points? And in the 5 games since then, he has had the same amount of points combined as he had in that blow up game. I mean, this guy's just not, and I don't understand. I was watching that game was pretty difficult to watch, the Saints Tampa Bay game, but you keep seeing Mark Ingram on the field over and over. And I'm
Final seconds of the game. He's
yes.
injured. He's running like holding his groin as he's running. And
It made no sense. So is there something else going on we're not hearing about with Kamara, or just I mean, the Saints are pretty head scratching in general that they're still starting Andy Dalton over presumably healthy Jameis Winston, and that division is up for grabs. I don't really know what they're doing over there. So I don't know. I kind of went off on a tangent there, but I don't think Kamara's anything close to a league winner. He's just not getting the points. Unless this was meant to be a funny question, Bennett, then hats off. That's pretty
yeah,
hilarious.
I don't really understand it. He's just getting phased out. Like you said, for how old is Mark Ingram now? 33, 34 years
Too
old. And
old.
it doesn't make any sense to me. It's just it's terrible what Dennis Allen is doing. Like I don't understand his personnel decisions whatsoever. Yeah, I don't completely understand the question, Bennett, but I don't think that Kamara is going to help you win a league. And how frustrating is it to like Drew Davenport on the Football Guys staff? He's a lawyer. He put in so much time and energy to like help dig deep into this Kamara case. And the process was completely right, where he said, there's almost no chance that he is going to get suspended. So Kamara, had he not had that potential suspension looming over his head, probably would have been a back end first round pick. And we were able to get him in the late second, early third round of drafts this offseason because of the fears of suspension. And sure enough, Drew nailed it. There's been no suspension. The process was right. We got a guy who should be a blue chip talent at a discount. And now, rather than worrying about the suspension or any of these other issues, he's just not getting on the field. I don't really understand what's going on, but yeah, it's been frustrating for anybody that had to pay up for Kamara this year for sure. Next question comes in from Mickey Welka saying, pick one for flex PPR, Mike Evans or Travis Etienne.
Goodness. Mike Evans didn't see. I remember watching the games. Mike Evans first catch of the night, and I'm like, what? How long has this game been?
Third quarter, I think, right?
It was wild, although something about the Saints. I didn't know Lattimore wasn't even out there.
Lattimore wasn't even there.
Exactly, right? Because I was like, oh, Lattimore's going to shut him down. Didn't even play. And still Mike Evans is kind of lost in the shuffle when they played. I'd have to look up because I don't have Evans on many teams. I still would – I would assume ETN here. I don't know where you're going with your answer here, Dave, but
I'm definitely going with ETN, and
yeah.
he might even be trending down ever so slightly right now. Travis
Sure.
ETN isn't the shiny new bubble that he was a few weeks ago, but Mike Evans, the thing with him, he's never been a high target guy. I mean, I think he had a 19% target share last year. Like he's never been that target hog. He just rips off big plays and scores touchdowns at an obscene rate. Well, guess what? He hasn't scored a
Touchdowns
touchdown since
aren't
week
there.
5.
Whew.
He's got 3 on the entire year. He's only surpassed 100 yards twice this season. So he has been a liability. I mean, looking at these last few weeks, 59 scoreless yards, 31 scoreless yards, 54 scoreless yards, 40 scoreless yards. Those are 4 straight weeks where he has really hurt you if he's in your lineup. So, I mean, there's always the chance that Mike Evans could have a huge game, but he and Brady just haven't been on the same page this year. Now he's got a really tough matchup against San Francisco where they're going to be able to consistently get interior pressure on Brady, and that's what usually makes Brady crack. So this could be a bad game for the Bucs. And Vic, I don't know how much you've noticed it watching these games, but it's bizarre. Like we continuously see Mike Evans get wide open and either Brady misses him or we saw that one, what was it, about 4 or 5 weeks ago? Mike Evans blows the top off the defense, wide open, hits him in the hands, and you saw him bobble it for like
Yes.
15 yards
Oh
before
my
he inevitably
gosh.
dropped it. It is just I don't know what's going on with Mike Evans, but he just isn't himself. And Maybe it's his age catching up to him. I mean, what he's
For
29
both
years
of
old now,
them.
I believe.
For him and Brady, I think. And even on that broadcast for the primetime game, you got these guys talking saying, "Oh, Brady's had the worst completion percentage since 2013 or so on his throws 20 or more yards down the field." And these guys still can't just say after they give that stat, "Yeah, he might be declining a bit." They got to say something like, "Well, the caveat there is that he does throw the ball a lot that far," and they're like struggling to just say maybe he's losing a step.
And nobody
But
wants to because people
I
9 years ago
know.
said, "Hey, Brady's trending down," and then
True.
you proved them all wrong. So now Brady's gonna be 50 years old and throwing for 110 yards a game, and people are gonna say, "Yeah, well, it's the supporting cast, and he's got missing some offensive linemen." I mean,
Mhm.
you can't say anything bad about Brady at this point in his career because he's just
Exactly.
continuously hushed the critics. But there's something going on where him and Evans just aren't on the same page, and we've seen it now. I mean, I think we can say with full confidence now, Chris Godwin has surpassed him in the pecking order. Now with that ACL injury behind him, Chris Godwin is the guy in Tampa Bay. So there are a lot of targets to go around in this Tampa Bay offense, but they're going to Godwin first, and then Evans is going to
Rachaad
get what's
White.
left over there. Yeah, and then Rachaad White and Fournette are both really involved in the passing game as well. So I mean, looking at it, we've got 3 straight weeks where Evans has been held to single digit targets. And then, he had a little stretch where he was seeing a bunch of targets there, but he wasn't all that productive with them. I mean, you go back to week 9, 11 targets, and he only caught 5 of them for 40 yards. So I'm starting to think that Godwin, just with, the bear traps for hands, I mean, he catches everything that comes his way. And I think Brady is just starting to favor him more. So, yeah, definitely going with ETN here over Mike Evans. Next question comes in from Olaf Fubb. PPR 10 team. I need one wide receiver, and it's another Gabe Davis question. Everybody is tilting about Gabe Davis this week, apparently. Gabe
Yep.
Davis, Brandon Ayuk, Darius Slayton, or Tyler Boyd. And again, this is just kind of that things change fast because last week this would have been Brandon Ayuk. Next question, and that would have been the end of it. But now with Brock Purdy at quarterback, I don't know. The waters are muddied a little bit. Who are you starting here, Vic?
Gosh. Your argument for Gabe earlier was fantastic. Well, the Fub, if you weren't rocking with us a couple minutes ago, just kind of go back to that YouTube video and hear Dave's take on Gabe. It's close between Gabe and Slayton for me. I actually think Slayton has been fantastic, quietly fantastic for fantasy over the last couple of weeks. Even I had this already from a podcast I was on earlier. Since week 9, wide receiver 21 overall, 14 PPR points per game. Darius Slayton, like we didn't even know if this guy was going to be on the team in the beginning of the fantasy season. They look like they were loaded there. So
Now he's the wide receiver one on a playoff
unbelievable.
bound Giants team.
Playoff. Like, how do they keep winning? Brian Daboll just working magic with no skill play. I mean, outside of Saquon. Anyway, I digress. But 10 targets. I lost my place here. 10 targets, 6 targets, 8 targets over the last 3 weeks. 63 yards or more, same time span. I mean, he's kind of been a fantastic flex over the last few weeks. Upside though is with Gabe. It is. So I feel like you still got to go Gabe here, but it's close.
Yeah. I'm gonna go Gabe here too. And it's weird, I was a guy this offseason that wasn't all that big on Gabe, but I feel like people have kind of overcorrected now where they're, throwing him in as I should start benching him. And I feel like if you paid up for Gabe Davis, he has had those boom weeks. And like I said earlier, he's just got to learn to embrace the variance. You're not going to get a 30-point week every single week, but you don't want that happening when it's on your bench. And with the matchup against the Jets, them hopefully, well, not hopefully, but probably focusing on Stephon Diggs. This could be a game where Gabe Davis goes off. So I'm going to go with Gabe Davis here out of this bunch. But Slayton, I mean, just like imagine that we were back 4 years ago. It's August, and we're sitting here talking about Darius Slayton or Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis was a third-round pick, and Darius Slayton, like you said, we didn't even know he was going to be on the team. So, I mean, life comes at you fast, and here we are trying to adjust on the fly heading into Week 14. Got another question here from Mickey Welka saying Kirk Cousins or Deshaun Watson this week. We had this same exact
Oh.
conversation last week, and we were all in agreement that Deshaun Watson for the upside, but he stunk. He looked so bad
Oh
last week.
my gosh, you guys listening, Me, Dave, Troy, we're in our Twitter group chat. I'm like, what is that? The game just started, and I always tilt as soon as the game starts on Sundays. And Watson, I should have never sat Gino for Watson. It's early. The guy's trying to cheer me up. It's early. Woof. I remember watching Red Zone, and I think it was the only Red Zone trip that Cleveland had for the afternoon, but when Watson threw the pick in the end
They had two
zone.
because they had the one that was an immediate turnover that
Oh,
put
my
them in the red
apologies.
zone. Yes,
Okay,
so
okay.
but they only had one where Watson actually drove to the end zone and they
Oh
settled
my
for a field goal.
gosh. Yes, but he threw a pick in the end zone, and it seemed like he forgot he didn't play for the Texans
That's
anymore.
what I'm saying. He saw a Texans jersey and was just like, "Yep, there's my guy. He's wide open," because there wasn't a Browns defender anywhere near.
That was the wildest thing to see. And you know what? Karma to all of us who started him in our lineups. And I won't say why, but you know why. Anyways, I
We
digress
deserved it.
again, right?
We deserved it.
You gotta go Cousins here, right?
Yeah, especially against Denver, I'm sorry, against Detroit, but like we said, 53.5 total for this game. It's going to be a shootout. I think you got
Yeah,
to go Cousins with here as well.
gonna crush it.
And one thing, I'll just give the audience a little peek behind the curtain here. Like you said, Victoria likes to overreact a few minutes into kickoff, but we genuinely, when we give bad advice on this show, it eats us apart. And we were telling everybody to start Deshaun
Yeah.
Watson last week because it seemed like a good matchup for him. And I can tell you, firsthand, Troy, Victoria, and we were all feeling pretty bad on Sunday for recommending that. But if it does make you feel any better, I rolled Deshaun Watson out in quite a few lineups myself, and I had to eat those 4.2 points as
Oh
well.
my
So
god.
not only do we feel bad because we take our own advice, but we feel especially bad when we give bad advice to the audience. So sorry about that one. I think that you go with Kirk Cousins this week. Next question comes in from YouTube and asking Pacheco, Akers, White, or Cook. So I'm guessing obviously Isaiah Pacheco, Cam Akers, Rachaad White,
Rachaad
and
White?
James
Gotta
Cook.
be.
And again, it seems like every week we have so many
Yep.
of the same names that are just getting circulated in these start sit questions. We've talked about White at length. We've talked about Cook at length. We haven't talked about Isaiah Pacheco or Cam Akers at all, though. So who are you taking out of this bunch? Need to start three, so we're actually only benching one here.
Oh, benching one. Okay.
Bench Akers.
Yeah, I was gonna say that makes it a lot easier benching Akers. And now you might say, but he had so many points last. No, he had 2 touchdowns. So take away. I don't want to say take away the touchdowns as if he'll never score again, but propped up by 2 touchdowns. I think 19 PPR points, something like that. That's a variance week after week, and the Rams just can't count on the Rams scoring touchdowns. And Pacheco is coming into his own here. He's got a safe floor. So yeah, gotta sit Akers here.
Now, I don't throw around the term league winner often, but Isaiah Pacheco right now, I mean, it sure looks like he could be a league winner. We talked about this a little bit earlier today. Vic, I think it was in the group chat with you. But if you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, their opponents through the rest of the
Oh,
season have a 32.5 win percentage. 32.5. They have the softest schedule for the rest of the year. So let me just tell you who Isaiah Pacheco and the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be facing off over the next 4
yes.
weeks. Denver, Houston, Seattle, and then Denver again. I mean,
Unreal.
these are games that are going to be easy wins for Kansas City. And we know that Pacheco, he doesn't get super involved in the passing game. He is game script dependent. So when the Kansas City Chiefs are up 4 touchdowns at halftime, expect to see a lot of Isaiah Pacheco in the second half of these games. So yeah, Pacheco, if you were able to get him, it was a rocky start to the season and on the bench and off the bench and usage kind of all over the place. But like you said, he is coming into his own and has a cakewalk of a schedule for the next 4 weeks. So I think Pacheco's a guy that, unless you've got some fantastic options, you got to find a way to get him into your lineup. Next question comes here from John W. And John is asking us, start Geno Smith or Dak Prescott? And let me take a look really quickly. Geno Smith is going up against Carolina. Dak Prescott is going up against Houston.
I hate an or Dak question. Okay, so last season, if y'all were
Wrong
rocking
every
with
week.
us every single week, I had, for some silly reason, I picked up Jalen Hurts with my last round pick last season, but I had Dak as my starter, but I kept Jalen because he was awesome. Every week on the show, we would talk about, am I going to start Jalen Hurts or Dak? And I got it wrong
You went 0
every
for 6 down the stretch. Like we talked about this for 6
single
weeks and missed
week.
every week.
It was incredible. How can you be wrong that many times in a row? I just talented, I
So,
guess.
so Vic, just a little tangent here. In my home league this year, I somehow ended up with Kyler Murray and Tua Tagovailoa, and I knew that I
Oh
was going to be in
no.
the same position where I'd have to choose between these guys every single week, and I knew that I'd pick the wrong one every single week. So I just flat out dropped Tua. I said I'm not dealing with the headache. I'll let somebody else pick up Tua and deal
Oh
with it. And now the guy that has Tua Tagovailoa and Justin Herbert has started the wrong guy every
no.
single week.
Oh
So my
no.
advice, if you're in a single quarterback league with shallow benches, just drop one of those guys, let him be a grenade. If you've got a guy that you have deemed as a top 10 quarterback, just ride him through good and bad.
I love that so much. Ooh, so I'm not the only one. That makes me feel better. Thank you so much, Dave. Ah, goodness gracious. This is tough though. I've been rocking with Gino in my league that I lost Trey Lance in every single week. Every single week. So for me it's Gino here. I
See,
don't know
for
if it's that easy for you though.
I think I like Dak better rest of season. Like if we're just looking overall in a vacuum, I like Dak better. But they're playing Houston this week, and the way to beat Houston is to run it down their throats.
Right.
Dak isn't going to need to throw for 350 yards. He's not going to need to push the ball down the field. Dax is going to be turning around, giving the ball to Ezekiel Elliott, turning around, giving the ball to Tony Pollard. That's going to be the game plan here against Houston. So I do like Dak. I mean, happy to see him healthy and balling out again. But in this matchup against Houston, even though it could look like a really good matchup against a terrible defense, I just don't think he's going to have to push the ball much. So I think that his ceiling is pretty limited in this outing. I mean, there's always the chance that they come out throwing and they just go up huge, but I think that more than enough teams have showed that the way to beat Houston this year is just to run it. So I'm going to go with Gino here. Oh, Christian Durantis. Oh no. Oh no, I hate this question. Is DeAndre Swift done for the season? He's on the injury report again. It was so bizarre. You know, he was off the injury report, didn't hear anything about an injury. He played great. And then, like we said, just popped up today with a sprained ankle, the same ankle that's been bothering him all season. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how to speculate here, but my goodness, this is gross.
Yeah, because I mean, we've been asking this for a while though. Would they just shut him down? Obviously, they've been winning some games, but I just don't see a playoff berth in their future. So you wonder if they just rock with Jamaal and go from there. We talked on a little bit earlier, Christian, but I hope not. I hope we just get to see him play, but it's probably for the best. We'll see. We're overreacting a little bit too. It is Wednesday. We'll see how he looks on Thursday, Friday practice reports, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think where we're at with DeAndre Swift now and what we saw last week, he wasn't on the practice report heading into last week's game, and he got the majority of the touches. So I think that's kind of, I mean, it might sound like really surface level analysis here, but I think that's just kind of what you do with DeAndre Swift. If he's on the injury report, bench him. If he's not on the injury report on Sunday morning, play him. I think it's just kind of as simple as that. And I mean, we don't have a huge sample size here, but based on what we've seen this year to start the season, when he wasn't on the injury report, he was an absolute beast. And then he spent the next 7 or 8 weeks banged up and wasn't getting his full workload. And then last week off the injury report and he crushed it again. So I think that's just what you got to do. If he's on the injury report, the lines are telling us something. And I think that's just kind of how you got to play it from here on out. Next question here comes from Jimmy Williams. What are your thoughts on the Miami backfield this week and rest of season between Jeff
Oh,
Wilson and Raheem Mostert? I appreciate the input. This is another one. Like we thought we had this figured out. Like Jeff Wilson took over. Awesome. You got Jeff Wilson. You got a league winner, the lead back on an awesome Miami offense. And then he was just useless last week. And Raheem Mostert's the guy. I don't know. I hate it.
yeah, but it's like I just remember I'm looking it up again. How many times did they actually run the ball?
I think Mostert had about a dozen carries, didn't he?
I'm looking week 13, Mostert 7 for 30.
Ooh, I thought he had
And
more touches than that, but yeah,
and
that's not
and
good.
Wilson 1 for 3. That's it. They didn't run the ball. I mean, we know what happened last week, right? Kind of freak circumstances, but yeah, it was
And they got
very,
pummeled,
very
and
weird.
Tua looked terrible.
Yeah, it was not good. I mean, you see how Tua struggles without that kind of elite O line there, but they barely rushed the ball. It was just head scratching. So I wish we had Troy, our resident Miami fan, here to answer this question. I want to actually point out that Jimmy Williams said appreciate the input, as Troy always says, appreciate y'all. So call that out, but this is another head scratcher. This is probably add this one to the number 5 on that list of backfields where we're just giving your best guess. If you need someone for a flex and you have one or the other, I would be very, very scared to see what happens this week, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I mean, last week was a really tough matchup. The Chargers are easy to run against, so they have a much better matchup this week. I think I'm still going to lean towards Jeff Wilson Jr. a little bit, but don't really feel too good about it right now. I mean, we know Mike McDaniel comes from that Shanahan tree. Shanahan loves his hot hand, and yeah, we could be getting some Shanahanigans down in in Miami as well. Here's a good question from Blue Crew: Isaiah Pacheco or Jeff Wilson Jr. at the flex? I think we're probably in agreement on this one, right?
Absolutely. Put Pacheco in and don't look back.
Yep. Flex 1, Hollywood Brown, Josh Palmer, Jerry Jeudy, or Rachaad White. Y'all, it's going to be a Hollywood Brown week. I'm just telling you. Hollywood Brown wide receiver 1 in week 14.
I was thinking the same thing. And I was about to say, I'm surprised we got only a few minutes left, and this was our first Hollywood question. That is actually surprising to me.
His consensus ranking right now, I'm looking at the full consensus here. People are ranking him as a wide receiver 3. And I don't get it. He was 5th overall in scoring at the time of his injury. This dude was a beast. And then we know playing against the Patriots, what they like to do is bracket a team's main weapon. So they're going to have man-to-man coverage on DeAndre Hopkins with a safety over the top, and that is going to lead for some big plays for Hollywood Brown. Last week in Hollywood Brown's first game back, 93% of the taps, no limitations whatsoever, and he out-targeted DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins had the better fantasy output, but the targets are going Hollywood Brown's way. That connection all the way back from college, it's still there. I mean, Kyler Murray and Marquise Brown are just playing unconscious football with each other. They make it look easy. Yep. This one for me is Hollywood by a landslide.
Absolutely. And you've held them this long. Come on, let's fire them up.
Exactly. All right, we got time for one more question here, Victoria, and this is a crazy one. I mean, these guys are facing off against each other this week. Jared Goff or Kirk Cousins for the rest of the season. Again, this is another one of those that here we are talking about. Imagine asking this in the preseason. We'd have laughed so hard. Kirk Cousins was supposed to be, the Matthew Stafford this year playing in this offense, and he was going to light it up with the best wide receiver in the league, and hasn't really been there. Meanwhile, Jared Goff just keeps churning out, solid weeks.
I think, Goff kind of struggled in this the middle of the season. He's come back a little bit these last 2 weeks, throwing for over 300 last week. He's looking better. But again, we just talked about if Swift was there last week. Obviously, he had another outlet there to help him out. I got to go Cousins. I'm looking at the Vikings schedule. Obviously, the Lions is a great matchup this week. Then he's got the Colts, Giants, Packers, and Bears. Obviously Bears. I think that's the last game of the season, not for 18, fantasy.
Yeah, they're done by then.
Apologies, but it's close. It's a toss-up. And like you just said, now you're making me think, my goodness, he's got Justin Jefferson. How is this man not better for fantasy? Oh, my goodness, it bothers me every year. But I think I got to go Kirky, I guess.
I'm kind of surprised. They're less than half a point per game separating each other. I mean, Jared Goff is right on his heels in per-game scoring. I think I'm going to go with Jared Goff.
Ooh, he's got
hot. They've been hot.
He's got obviously the Vikings this week, Jets, Panthers, Bears in the championship. So that's nice.
I'm going to go with Jared Goff here this week and for the rest of the season.
All right.
All right, Vic. Well, we did it. We didn't get through all the questions today, but that just means that we have a good and engaged audience, and we will try our best to get through all of these questions next week. We are here every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Next week, we should be back with the whole crew. Hopefully, Troy will wake up from his hot dog coma by then. But Victoria, before we sign off, let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
Yes, of course, you can find me at FFB_Victoria. If you didn't get to your question, just add us on Twitter, and I'll take a look.
Absolutely. And I'm Dave Kluge. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. That is Kluge. Be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/footballguys so you can see all the video content that we are bringing to you. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.